I cooked Thanksgiving dinner for my son and his family, but they never showed up. When I called, my daughter-in-law laughed. We're at a real grandma's house. I sat alone with candles lit, food untouched. But the next morning they saw the family photo I mailed back, with their faces torn out and a message they'll never forget. The cranberry sauce was still warm when my phone buzzed at 3:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been staring at the kitchen clock, watching the minutes crawl by like wounded animals. Shane and his family were supposed to arrive at 3:47 minutes late. Wasn't unusual for them, but my stomach had been twisting into knots since noon. I'm Morgan, and this was supposed to be my redemption Thanksgiving. The one where I proved I could still be the heart of this family even after Dylan, my husband of 28 years, decided that Savannah's younger body and brighter smile were worth throwing away nearly 3 decades of marriage. Even after he moved into her pristine suburban palace while I stayed in our old farmhouse, the one where Shane learned to walk, where we carved pumpkins every October, where Christmas mornings used to sparkle with genuine laughter. The dining room looked perfect. I'd spent 3 days preparing, polishing my grandmother's silver until it gleamed, ironing the lace tablecloth that had graced our table for every major holiday since Shane was born. The good china, the set Dylan and I received as a wedding gift, reflected the warm glow of the vanilla-scented candles I'd arranged down the center. 5 place settings. 5 chairs pulled out waiting. 5 members of what I desperately hoped was still my family. Shane had called 2 weeks ago, his voice carrying that careful tone he'd developed since the divorce. Mom will be there for Thanksgiving. I promise. Marissa's excited to see you and the kids have been asking about your stuffing. His words felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in an ocean of loneliness. I'd clung to that promise, replayed it during sleepless nights when the house felt too big and too quiet. I'd started cooking at dawn. Harvey's apple pie, the one with extra cinnamon because he said it reminded him of autumn leaves. Destiny's favorite macaroni and cheese, made from scratch with 3 different cheeses and breadcrumbs on top, the way she'd requested last Christmas before everything fell apart. Shane's beloved green bean casserole with those crispy onions he used to sneak from the container when he thought I wasn't looking. The turkey, golden and glistening, stuffed with my mother's cornbread dressing recipe that had been passed down for 3 generations. Every dish held a memory. Every aroma carried the ghost of holidays past when we were whole. When Dylan would carve the turkey with theatrical flourishes while Shane rolled his eyes and Marissa laughed at his dad's jokes. Before Savannah entered our lives like a tornado, leaving destruction in her wake while making everyone believe she was the sunshine after the storm. The call came as I was adjusting the gravy boat for the 10th time, my hands trembling slightly from caffeine and nerves. Shane's name flashed on my phone screen, and my heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe they were running late. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe. Hey Mom. His voice sounded distant, distracted. Background noise filtered through. Laughter, multiple conversations, the clink of silverware against plates. A celebration happening somewhere else. Shane, honey, where are you? Dinner's ready and it's getting cold. I tried to keep my voice light, casual, even as dread began pooling in my stomach like ice water. Yeah, about that. He paused, and in that silence I heard my world beginning to crack. We're not going to make it. Plans changed last minute. Changed? But you promised. You said. I know what I said, but Savannah invited us over and the kids really wanted to see their other grandparents. Dylan's parents are here too, and it's just easier, you know? Easier. The word hit me like a physical blow. 28 years of marriage, 31 years of being Shane's mother, and I'd been reduced to the inconvenient option. The difficult choice. The grandmother who required effort. Can I talk to Marissa? My voice barely qualified as a whisper. She's busy with the kids right now, but she says hi. Another lie. I could hear her distinctive laugh in the background, bright and carefree. She was having the time of her life at someone else's table while I sat alone with enough food to feed an army. Shane, please. I've been cooking all day. I made Harvey's pie, Destiny's. Mom, don't guilt trip me. We'll do something next weekend, okay? Gotta go. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my reflection trapped in its dark screen. A 53-year-old woman who'd just been dismissed like an outdated appointment. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down beside the untouched rolls, still warm from the oven. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of anticipation, but the hollow emptiness of abandonment. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across the empty chairs. The turkey sat cooling in its juices, the cranberry sauce forming a skin on top, the mashed potatoes slowly losing their perfect peaks. But it was the laugh that destroyed me. 30 minutes later, when desperation finally overwhelmed dignity, I called Shane's number again. This time Marissa answered on the second ring, her voice bubbling with wine and joy. "Oh, hi Morgan." She sounded genuinely surprised, as if she'd forgotten I existed. "Shane told me you called earlier." "Marissa, I don't understand." "Shane promised." "Oh, that." Her laugh was light, dismissive, the sound of someone who'd never had to sit alone on a holiday. "We're at a real grandma's house. Savannah made this incredible spread, and Dylan's parents brought the most amazing desserts. The kids are having such a blast with their cousins." Real grandma. The words hit me like shards of glass, each syllable drawing blood. A real grandma. As if 31 years of kissing scraped knees, reading bedtime stories, and making birthday cakes had been some elaborate dress rehearsal for the real thing. As if every Christmas morning, every bedtime song, every fierce hug during thunderstorms had been practice for when the real grandmother showed up. "I made Harvey's favorite pie," I whispered, hating how pathetic I sounded. "That's sweet, but Savannah has a whole dessert table. Professional bakery stuff. Instagram worthy, you know?" Another laugh, this one cutting deeper. "Anyway, we'll catch up soon. Happy Thanksgiving." The call ended, leaving me standing in my kitchen surrounded by the ruins of my hopes. Real grandma. Savannah, who'd known my grandchildren for exactly 18 months, was the real grandmother. I, who had changed their diapers, who had walked floors with them during teething nights, who had taught them their colors and letters, was apparently the understudy. I walked through my dining room like a ghost touring her former life. The gravy had formed a skin. The rolls were cold. The candles had burned down 2 inches while I'd waited for a family that was never coming. My reflection caught in the silver gravy boat. Distorted, fractured, barely recognizable. 28 years of marriage. 31 years of motherhood. 60 years of life. And in one afternoon, one conversation, one carelessly cruel laugh, I'd been erased. Not just forgotten, replaced. Upgraded. Traded in for a newer model who made Instagram-worthy desserts and had Dylan's parents' approval. I blew out the candles one by one, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling like prayers no one would answer. The house fell into darkness except for the kitchen light, where enough food for 5 people waited for no one. The real grandma was probably taking pictures of her perfect table, surrounded by my former family, while I stood alone in the ruins of my Thanksgiving dreams. For the first time since Dylan left, I didn't cry. Instead, something harder and colder settled in my chest. Something that whispered this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That cold, hard feeling in my chest crystallized overnight into something sharp and purposeful. I woke before dawn, not from sadness but from clarity. The house still smelled like turkey and disappointment, but something had shifted inside me while I slept. The woman who had waited by candles and cold gravy was gone. Someone else had taken her place. I walked through my living room in my bathrobe, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors Dylan and I had refinished together 15 years ago. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts of happier times. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt different. The family photos lining the mantelpiece seemed to mock me now, captured moments of a life that had been built on shifting sand. My eyes stopped on the large silver frame in the center. Last Christmas, the 5 of us gathered around my tree, the one Shane and Marissa had insisted on having at Grandma Morgan's house, because it was tradition. Destiny, then 7, was missing her front teeth in the most adorable way. Harvey, 5, was trying to look serious but couldn't hide his excitement about the presents underneath. Shane had his arm around my shoulders and Marissa was actually smiling. Not the fake Instagram smile she'd perfected recently, but a genuine expression of contentment. I remembered that day with painful precision. How Marissa had complimented my roast, how Shane had fallen asleep on my couch watching football, how the children had begged to stay overnight. "This feels like home," Marissa had whispered while helping me load the dishwasher, and I'd felt such gratitude for her acceptance, her inclusion of me in their expanding family circle. Always. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of warmth, theater performed for an audience of one gullible woman who'd believed she still mattered. I lifted the frame from the mantel, my fingers tracing the silver edges. The glass was spotless. I'd cleaned it just last week in preparation for Thanksgiving, wanting everything perfect for their visit. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. I'd polished the evidence of my own delusion. Walking to the kitchen table, I set the frame down beside the salt and pepper shakers Dylan's mother had given us as a housewarming gift 30 years ago. Everything in this house held memories, but memories, I was learning, could be weapons when wielded correctly. I opened the frame carefully, my movements deliberate and controlled. The photo slipped out easily and I laid it flat on the oak surface. 5 faces stared up at me from glossy paper. A family frozen in time, in lies, in a happiness that had apparently been one-sided. The scissors were in the kitchen drawer, right where they'd always been, nestled between the can opener and the meat thermometer. Heavy steel with red plastic handles, the same ones I'd used to cut out paper snowflakes with the children just 11 months ago. Destiny had been fascinated by how the folded paper opened into intricate patterns. "It's like magic, Grandma Morgan," she'd said, her small hands clapping in delight. What a joke. The only magic here was how quickly love could transform into something else entirely. I positioned Shane's face between the scissor blades first. My son, who'd promised to be there, who'd let me believe I still had a place in his world. The metal sliced through his smile with a soft whisper. His face separated from the rest of us cleanly, completely, leaving a Shane-shaped hole in our family portrait. Marissa came next. The woman who'd laughed about being at a real grandma's house, who'd spoken those words like they were nothing, like they wouldn't haunt my sleep and poison my waking hours. Her face was slightly blurred in the photo. She'd been turning toward Shane when I snapped the picture, caught in a moment of movement. How appropriate. Always in motion, always ready to move on to something better. The scissors made the same soft sound as they carved through her features. Snip. Gone. I held the 2 severed faces in my palm, studying them like an archaeologist examining artifacts from a dead civilization. Shane's eyes looked up at me with that familiar warmth that had fooled me for 31 years. Marissa's profile, caught in mid-laugh, seemed to echo her cruel words from yesterday's phone call. But the children remained. Destiny and Harvey, their innocent faces still attached to the photo, still connected to me. They hadn't chosen this betrayal. They were casualties, collateral damage in their parents' casual cruelty. My fingers traced their images gently, remembering bedtime stories and scraped knee kisses, birthday parties and Christmas mornings. The envelope came from my desk drawer. Crisp white paper, the expensive kind I used for thank you notes and sympathy cards. How fitting. This would be both. I arranged the torn pieces inside carefully, face down against the bottom of the envelope. Shane and Marissa, reduced to paper scraps, lying flat and lifeless like roadkill on a highway. The symbolism felt perfect. They'd turned their backs on me, so now they could lie face down in their own destruction. The red pen had been a gift from Harvey last Mother's Day, part of a little school craft set he'd proudly presented. "For writing special messages, Grandma," he'd explained with that gap-toothed grin. He'd been right. This was definitely a special message. I flipped the mutilated photo over, and the blank white back stared at me like an empty canvas waiting for truth. The pen felt substantial in my hand as I pressed it to the paper. Red ink flowed like blood from a fresh wound, forming words that had been burning in my chest since yesterday's phone call. A table set for love, but only ghosts showed up. The words looked stark against the white background, dramatic and final. But I wasn't finished. Yesterday had taught me that subtlety was wasted on people who could dismiss 30 years of devotion with a laugh. The real ones were never family. My handwriting was steadier than I'd expected, each letter formed with deliberate precision. The red ink caught the morning light streaming through my kitchen window, looking darker than I'd intended. Good. Dark matched my mood. "This is how you erased yourselves from my life, and now from my legacy." I capped the pen and set it down beside the ruined photograph. The message was complete, perfect in its brutal honesty. No begging, no pleading, no desperate attempts to guilt them into loving me. Just a simple statement of fact, delivered in language they couldn't misinterpret or dismiss. The envelope sealed with a soft hiss, trapping Shane and Marissa's faces inside like prisoners in a paper cell. I wrote their address in careful block letters. The address of the house they'd bought 3 years ago, the one they'd invited me to exactly twice, both times for major holidays when excluding me would have looked bad to Marissa's parents. The post office was only 10 minutes away, but I took my time getting dressed. This wasn't a moment to rush. I chose my navy dress, the one Shane had complimented at his last birthday dinner. I applied lipstick not for them but for me. For the woman I was becoming. The postal clerk was a young man with kind eyes who smiled when I approached his window. "Just this one today, ma'am?" "Just this one," I confirmed, sliding the envelope across the counter. "It's very important that it arrives quickly." "Priority mail then?" "Oh yes," I said, surprising myself with the warmth in my voice. "It's definitely a priority." He stamped it with official authority, and I watched my message disappear into the postal system's machinery. In 2 days, maybe 3, Shane would open his mailbox and find my response to yesterday's abandonment. No phone call this time. No chance for him to interrupt or dismiss or redirect the conversation. Just my truth, delivered in terms they'd finally understand. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The morning air tasted cleaner, sharper, full of possibilities I hadn't considered before. Revenge, I was discovering, had its own particular sweetness. They taught me that I wasn't the real grandma. Time to show them what the fake one could do. The law office of Richardson and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a historic brick building downtown, its mahogany-paneled walls lined with legal volumes that seemed to whisper secrets about other people's family dramas. I'd driven past this building countless times over the years, never imagining I'd one day sit in their leather chairs planning the systematic dismantling of my own family's expectations. Margaret Richardson was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 45, with silver threading through her auburn hair and eyes that suggested she'd witnessed enough human cruelty to develop a professional immunity to shock. Her handshake was firm, her smile cautious but genuine. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming in. Your phone call yesterday was intriguing." She gestured to the chair across from her imposing desk. Estate planning can be emotional, particularly when family relationships are strained. Such a delicate word for betrayal. "My relationship with my son has become complicated since my divorce," I said, settling into the burgundy leather. "I need to ensure my assets reflect my current reality, not past assumptions." Margaret opened a fresh legal pad, her pen poised. "Tell me about your current will." The document I drafted 5 years ago felt like ancient history now. Shane was the primary beneficiary, inheriting the house, my retirement accounts, everything except specific jewelry pieces designated for the grandchildren. It had seemed so natural then, the logical progression of generations, mother to son, the family home staying in family hands. "Everything goes to my son Shane, with provisions for my grandchildren." The words tasted stale in my mouth. "I want to change that. Completely." Margaret's pen didn't move. "Completely. Shane and his wife have made it clear that I'm no longer considered essential family. Yesterday they abandoned me on Thanksgiving to spend it with my ex-husband's new wife, calling her the real grandma." The professional setting made the words feel less raw, more factual. If I'm not real family, then I shouldn't leave them real inheritance. For the first time, Margaret's composed expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. "That's unfortunate. But estate planning based on emotional reactions can sometimes." "This isn't emotional," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is practical. They've demonstrated their priorities. I'm simply aligning my estate with their demonstrated values." Margaret set down her pen and leaned back. "Tell me exactly what you want to do." The plan had crystallized during my sleepless weekend, forming with the same methodical precision I'd once used to organize school fundraisers and holiday celebrations. Remove Shane and Marissa entirely. Create a trust for my grandchildren, Destiny and Harvey, but with conditions they must meet to inherit. What kind of conditions? Annual visits. Meaningful ones, not obligatory holiday appearances. They need to visit me at least once per year, every year until they turn 21. Real visits. Spending time having conversations, maintaining an actual relationship with me. Margaret made notes, her expression thoughtful. "And if they don't meet these conditions?" "The trust dissolves. The money goes to charity." I'd researched this part extensively online, cross-referencing legal sites until my eyes burned. They inherit nothing. That's legally possible, though unusual. What about your other assets? This was where my weekend research had led me down unexpected paths, discovering philanthropic organizations I'd never known existed. My house goes to the women's shelter downtown. They've been operating out of that cramped building on Elm Street for 15 years. My home has 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, space for families to rebuild their lives. Margaret's pen moved faster now, capturing the details of my systematic redistribution. Your retirement accounts? Educational scholarships. Specifically for first-generation college students who've aged out of the foster care system. I'd found this charity through 3 degrees of internet separation, starting with articles about inheritance planning and ending with heartbreaking stories of young adults facing the world without family support. Kids who know what it's like to be abandoned. Jewelry and personal items? The important pieces go to the Historical Society. My grandmother's engagement ring, my mother's pearls. They have stories worth preserving. The rest gets sold, proceeds to charity. Margaret looked up from her notes. And the wedding china? Family heirlooms. The question hit deeper than I'd expected. The china had been a wedding gift from Dylan's grandmother, a woman who'd welcomed me into their family with such warmth that I'd named my hope chest after her. 12 place settings of Lenox with the delicate rose pattern, stored in felt-lined cases and brought out only for special occasions. Auction it, I said finally. Let someone who'll actually use it buy it. Someone who'll fill it with real family dinners, not empty promises. Margaret finished writing and looked across the desk with professional concern. Mrs. Patterson, these are significant changes. Have you considered how your son might react? Legal challenges to the will. Let him try. The words came out harder than intended. He spent the last year showing me exactly how little I mean to him. Now he gets to live with the consequences of those choices. What about your ex-husband? Any claims there? Dylan forfeited any claim to my inheritance when he forfeited our marriage. I straightened in the chair, feeling my spine align with my resolve. He chose Savannah and her ready-made grandmother role. Let her support him in his old age. Margaret nodded slowly. I'll need to draft this carefully. The conditions for your grandchildren's trust need precise legal language to be enforceable. When would you like this completed? As soon as possible. I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook. What's your retainer? For work of this complexity, $1,500. I wrote the check without hesitation, my handwriting bold and certain. This was the most expensive decision I'd made since the divorce, and somehow the most satisfying. One more thing, I said, tearing off the check. I want Shane and Marissa to receive official notification of their removal from the will. Not the full document, just notice that they're no longer beneficiaries. Margaret raised an eyebrow. That's not typically necessary. They'll find out eventually. I want them to find out now. While the Thanksgiving betrayal is still fresh, while they still think my love comes without consequences. I handed her the check. Can you send it this week? Certified mail, return receipt requested? Perfect. Margaret clipped the check to her legal pad. I'll have preliminary documents ready for your review by Friday. The full will should be complete within 2 weeks. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you, Margaret. For the first time in months, I feel like I have some control over my future. Her handshake was warmer this time. Mrs. Patterson, I see a lot of family conflicts in my practice. Most people struggle with cutting off children, even when they've been hurt. I'm not cutting them off, I corrected. I'm simply requiring them to earn what they previously took for granted. The grandchildren have until they're adults to decide if I'm worth an annual visit. Shane and Marissa have already made their choice. Walking out of the law office, I felt the November air differently, sharper, cleaner, full of possibility rather than regret. The legal documents would arrive at Shane's house within days, probably before he'd even thought to call and apologize for Thanksgiving. He'd open his mailbox expecting bills and advertisements, and instead find official notification that his inheritance had evaporated like morning fog. $1,500 to rewrite my legacy. $1,500 to transform from discarded grandmother to architect of consequences. It seemed like the bargain of a lifetime. The high from my lawyer visit carried me through the rest of the week, but it was Thursday morning's social media scroll that transformed satisfaction into surgical precision. There, glowing on my phone screen, was Savannah's latest Instagram post. A perfectly curated tablescape featuring my mother's crystal stemware and my grandmother's silver serving pieces. The ones Dylan had claimed during our asset division, arguing they'd been gifts to the family rather than specifically to me. The caption read, "Thanksgiving leftovers taste better when served on heirloom china. So grateful for these beautiful family pieces that make every meal special. Hashtag blessed grandma, hashtag family traditions, hashtag heirloom love." Family pieces. My throat constricted as I zoomed in on the photo. There was my mother's gravy boat, the one with the tiny chip on the handle from when 5-year-old Shane had knocked it over during Christmas dinner 26 years ago. The silver cake server my grandmother had carried in her hope chest from Ireland in 1943. The crystal wine glasses Dylan and I had received as a wedding gift from his Aunt Martha, who'd saved for months to buy them because she wanted us to start married life with something beautiful. Savannah was using my history to build her Instagram brand, turning my family's legacy into content for her social media empire. 347 likes. Dozens of comments about how lucky she was to have such gorgeous vintage pieces. She was literally wearing my life like a costume, as I'd suspected, but seeing the evidence displayed so casually online felt like watching someone dance on my grave. But two could play the documentation game. I spent Thursday afternoon in my spare bedroom, the one Dylan used to call my museum room, because I kept the most precious family artifacts there. Glass display cases lined one wall, filled with items too delicate for daily use but too meaningful to store away completely. My grandmother's jet mourning brooch from 1952. My great-aunt's seed pearl necklace. The garnet ring my mother wore on her wedding day, passed down from her mother and her mother before that. These pieces had survived the divorce because Dylan couldn't see their value. They weren't obviously expensive like the crystal or silver, just old costume jewelry and sentimental trinkets, as he'd dismissively called them during our property settlement. He'd wanted the flashy stuff, the items that screamed wealth and status. I'd wanted the pieces that whispered stories. Now those whispered stories would become my weapons. I started with the mourning brooch, lifting it from its velvet-lined case with reverence. Black jet stones arranged in an intricate floral pattern, surrounded by seed pearls that had yellowed slightly with age. My grandmother had worn it to every funeral for 30 years, including my grandfather's in 1954. She'd given it to me when I turned 16, along with the story of how her own grandmother had worn it to mourn 3 children lost to influenza in 1918. "This brooch has held more grief than any piece of jewelry should," she told me. "But it's also held more love. When someone you care about dies, you wear this and remember that grief is just love with nowhere to go." Love with nowhere to go. How appropriate. The County Historical Museum occupied a restored Victorian mansion on Maple Street, its burgundy exterior and wraparound porch making it look more like a wealthy family's home than a repository for local artifacts. I'd visited here countless times over the years. Field trips with Shane's elementary school classes, afternoon strolls with the grandchildren, quiet solo visits when I needed to remember that the past had weight and substance. Director Patricia Hartwell greeted me in the museum's main hall, her smile genuine but curious. We'd served together on the library board for 6 years, bonded over shared frustrations with budget cuts and community apathy toward preserving local history. "Morgan, what a lovely surprise. Are you here for the new textile exhibit?" "Actually, Patricia, I'm here about a donation." I opened my purse and withdrew the small jewelry box containing the mourning brooch. "I'd like to contribute to your permanent collection." Patricia's eyes widened as she lifted the brooch from its cushioned interior. "Morgan, this is exquisite. The craftsmanship is incredible. Probably 1940s or early 1950s. 1952 to be exact. It belonged to my grandmother, Catherine O'Brien Patterson. She immigrated from County Cork in 1943, carrying this in her hope chest along with her wedding dress and 3 silver spoons. I'd rehearsed this part, wanting the story to be perfect. She wore it to mourn her husband, her siblings, her friends, anyone who mattered enough to grieve properly. The provenance is wonderful. We have very few pieces from Irish immigrants of that era. Patricia turned the brooch over, examining the simple pin mechanism. "Are you certain you want to donate this? It must have tremendous sentimental value." "That's exactly why I want it here." I pulled out the handwritten note I'd prepared, my carefully crafted legacy statement. "I want it displayed with this placard. I want people to learn about Catherine O'Brien Patterson, about the women who came before us and the grief they carried with grace. Patricia read my proposed text aloud. Mourning brooch circa 1952, worn by Catherine O'Brien Patterson to honor the deaths of loved ones. Donated in memory of Morgan Patterson. Left behind but never forgotten. May this piece remind visitors that love endures beyond betrayal, and history belongs to those who preserve it. Morgan. Patricia's voice carried concern. This sounds rather final. Are you feeling all right? I laughed, the sound surprising us both with its lightness. I'm feeling clearer than I have in years, actually. My family has decided I'm not worth their time, so I'm ensuring my legacy lives somewhere that values preservation over convenience. Patricia's expression softened with understanding. Family disputes can be so painful. Are you sure this isn't something you might regret? Patricia, my ex-husband's new wife, is currently using my mother's china to build her social media following. My son abandoned me on Thanksgiving to spend it with the real grandma. They want to erase me from their story, but they can't erase me from history. I gestured toward the brooch. This piece will outlive all of us. In 50 years, someone will read that placard and know that Catherine O'Brien Patterson existed, that she mattered, that her granddaughter cared enough to preserve her memory properly. Patricia nodded slowly. We'd be honored to accept this donation. When would you like the installation completed? As soon as possible. And Patricia? I'd appreciate if you added it to your newsletter and social media announcements. Sometimes the most important donations deserve public recognition. She smiled with the kind of warmth reserved for fellow conspirators. I think a feature story would be appropriate. Local woman honors family legacy through historical preservation. We could run it in next month's community newsletter. Perfect. The newsletter that everyone in town received, including Dylan and Savannah. Including Shane and Marissa. Including every social circle that had watched my marriage implode and wondered what happened to poor Morgan Patterson. That sounds wonderful. I shook Patricia's hand, sealing the deal. My grandmother would have loved knowing her brooch would educate future generations about Irish immigrant experiences. Walking back to my car, I felt the same lightness I'd experienced leaving the lawyer's office. Another piece of my strategic puzzle falling into place. Savannah could post her Instagram photos with my stolen china, but she'd never be able to claim the stories. Those belonged to me, and now they'd belong to history. The museum would feature my donation within weeks. The newsletter would circulate throughout our small community. And eventually, inevitably, Dylan and Savannah would visit the museum. They attended every charity gala and social function in town, always eager to see and be seen. When they did, they'd find me waiting in glass cases and carefully worded placards, my name permanently etched into local history while theirs remained forgotten footnotes in other people's stories. My grandmother's grief brooch would outlast their marriage, their happiness, their carefully curated social media presence. It would whisper the true story long after their lies had been forgotten. Some legacies, I was learning, were too important to leave to family. The momentum of reclaiming my narrative carried me through the weekend, but it was Sunday evening's mindless social media scroll that provided the perfect opening for my next move. Marissa had posted again. A carefully staged photo of herself, Shane, and the children gathered around Savannah's dining table, everyone wearing coordinated autumn sweaters that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The caption made my blood simmer. So grateful for 3 generations under one roof. There's nothing like family traditions and making memories with the people who matter most. Blessed to have such an amazing support system. #family first, #3 generations, #grateful, #blessed life. 3 generations. The people who matter most. The casual erasure of my existence, packaged in Instagram perfect prose with strategic hashtags designed to build her influencer brand. Marissa had accumulated nearly 4,000 followers by marketing herself as the ideal wife, mother, and family coordinator. Local businesses paid her to feature their products. The PTA had made her their social media coordinator. She'd built an entire secondary income around projecting family perfection. But perfection, I'd learned, was fragile. It only took one crack to shatter the entire illusion. I walked back to my dining room where the remnants of Thanksgiving still lingered. I'd left everything exactly as it was that night. The candles burned down to stubs, the place settings still arranged for 5, the centerpiece wilting but hauntingly beautiful in its decay. It looked like a museum exhibit, The Abandoned Holiday 2024. The lighting was perfect. Late afternoon sun slanted through my lace curtains, casting golden shadows across the empty chairs and untouched plates. The scene told its story without words. Hope, preparation, abandonment, solitude. It was honest in a way Marissa's curated content could never be. I took 17 photos from different angles before finding the one that captured the full emotional weight of that night. Me sitting alone at the head of the table, my hands folded in my lap, eyes slightly downcast but not defeated. The empty chairs seemed to lean away from me like disappointed guests. The elaborate place settings looked almost accusatory in their perfection. But it was beautiful too. Tragic and dignified and undeniably real. The caption took me 43 minutes to write. Each word needed to be perfect. Truthful without being vindictive, heartbreaking without being manipulative, powerful without being preachy. I wrote 17 versions before settling on the one that felt exactly right. Cooked for 5. Ate alone. Real love doesn't forget. 9 words. 37 characters. A complete story of betrayal and resilience that left nothing to interpretation while naming no names. I posted it at 6:23 p.m. on Sunday, right when local social media engagement typically peaked. After dinner, before Sunday night television, when people scrolled mindlessly through their feeds while pretending to help children with homework. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Linda Hofstetter, my former neighbor, commented within minutes. "Oh honey, my heart breaks for you." 23 likes on her comment alone. Janet Morrison from the library board. "Some people forget where they came from. You deserve so much better." Sarah Chin, who'd worked with me on the school fundraiser for 3 years. "This made me cry. Real family shows up." But it was Rebecca Walsh's comment that really started the avalanche. "Wait, wasn't this the weekend Shane and his family were supposed to visit? I remember you mentioning it at book club." The small-town network activated like a telephone tree from the 1950s. People who'd watched Shane grow up, who remembered me bringing homemade cookies to every school event, who'd witnessed my devotion during Dylan's mother's final illness. They began connecting dots that Marissa's perfect family posts had carefully obscured. By Monday morning, my post had been shared 47 times and commented on 86 times. Not viral by Instagram standards, but devastating by small-town social media metrics. In a community of 12,000 people where everyone knew everyone's business within 3 degrees of separation, this was the equivalent of front-page news. The comments section became a digital support group for abandoned grandparents and forgotten family members. Margaret Kowalski shared her own story about being excluded from her daughter's wedding. Tom Bradley talked about not seeing his grandchildren since his son's remarriage. My simple post had opened a floodgate of similar experiences, creating a community of people who'd been quietly enduring their own versions of family rejection. But the real impact wasn't in the likes and shares. It was in the spaces between the posts. The conversations happening at the grocery store checkout, in the pharmacy line, during school pickup. I learned about these secondhand, through friends who felt compelled to report back to me with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "People are talking, Morgan," my neighbor Carol told me Tuesday morning while retrieving her newspaper. "Janet from the flower shop asked me if it was true that Shane and Marissa ditched you for Thanksgiving. I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, deadheading the last of my chrysanthemums. The truth speaks for itself. Wednesday brought the first real consequence. Marissa called, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Morgan, we need to talk." "Hello, Marissa. How was your Thanksgiving?" The pause stretched long enough for me to count 3 heartbeats. "That post of yours is causing problems." "What post?" "Don't play games. You know exactly what I'm talking about. People are asking questions. Uncomfortable questions." I settled into my kitchen chair, suddenly fascinated by the conversation. "What kind of questions?" "About why we weren't there. About family loyalty. Rebecca Walsh cornered me at Target yesterday asking if everything was okay between us." Her voice climbed an octave. "I had to lie and say you were sick." "Interesting choice. You could have told the truth, that you were at a real grandma's house, having a wonderful time." Another pause, longer this time. That came out wrong. I was stressed and... "Marissa, I posted one photo. One caption. I didn't mention your name, Shane's name, or anyone's name. I simply shared my Thanksgiving experience. But people know. In a town this size, everyone knows who your family is. Your post makes us look terrible. Does it? Or does it make you look exactly like what you are? The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me I'd hit my target. Morgan, please. Can you take it down? This is affecting my partnerships. Sunset Boutique called this morning asking if there were family conflicts that might reflect poorly on their brand association. Sunset Boutique, the local clothing store that paid Marissa $300 per month to model their seasonal collections. Her first domino beginning to fall. I'm sorry to hear that, Marissa. But I can't take down the truth. It's not the whole truth. You're making it seem like we abandoned some helpless old woman, when really we just had other plans. Other plans, I repeated slowly. That's one way to describe choosing between grandmothers. Savannah's parents were visiting. It was important family time. And I'm not important family? The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Finally, Marissa's voice returned, smaller now. Of course you're family. But it's complicated. It doesn't feel complicated from where I'm sitting, Marissa. It feels quite simple, actually. Thursday morning brought news from my friend Helen, who worked part-time at the elementary school. The PTA moms are buzzing about Marissa. Apparently, her social media coordinator position is under review. Something about maintaining the organization's reputation for family values. Friday's revelation came through my hairstylist, whose sister worked at the local bank. That daughter-in-law of yours lost another sponsorship deal. Something about a juice cleanse company not wanting to be associated with family drama. I never commented on any of the secondary posts about my situation. Never added fuel to the fire or guided the narrative in any particular direction. I simply let the truth resonate in whatever way it needed to, trusting that people would draw their own conclusions about a family that abandoned their matriarch on Thanksgiving. The beauty of small-town social dynamics was their organic justice system. No one needed to explicitly condemn Shane and Marissa's behavior. The subtle shifts in community regard were consequence enough. Fewer likes on Marissa's posts. Questions that followed them at public events. The quiet judgment of a community that still believed in certain fundamental values about respecting your elders. By the end of the week, Marissa's follower count had dropped by nearly 400 people, and her engagement rates were in free fall. The perfect family brand she'd spent 3 years building was crumbling, not from any attack I'd launched but from the simple weight of truth. All I'd done was sit at my table and tell my story. Everything else had been their choice, both the initial abandonment and the community's response to it. Sometimes I realized the most powerful revenge was simply refusing to hide other people's shame. The months following my social media truth-telling settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. Quiet, purposeful, and entirely my own. Spring brought the museum's newsletter featuring my grandmother's brooch, complete with a full-page spread about preserving immigrant legacy through thoughtful donation. Summer delivered Margaret Richardson's meticulously crafted legal documents, officially sealing Shane and Marissa's removal from my estate. By autumn, when the first hints of Thanksgiving preparations began appearing in store displays, I felt something I hadn't expected: anticipation. Not the desperate hope of previous years, but a calm certainty about exactly how I wanted to spend the holiday. This year I shopped for one. The experience was surprisingly liberating. No mental calculations about Shane's preference for dark meat or Marissa's gluten sensitivities. No anxiety about whether Harvey would eat the green bean casserole or if Destiny might suddenly develop a new food aversion. Just me wandering the grocery aisles at my own pace, selecting exactly what appealed to me. A small heritage turkey from the local farm. Fresh cranberries for sauce that would be neither too tart nor too sweet, but exactly how I liked it. Butternut squash soup, something I'd never made when cooking for the family because Dylan claimed it was too fancy, and Shane insisted it looked weird. Sweet potato soufflé with real maple syrup instead of the marshmallow-topped version the grandchildren demanded. For the first time in decades, my Thanksgiving menu reflected my tastes, my preferences, my vision of what a perfect meal should be. The preparation felt like meditation. No rushing to accommodate arrival times or dietary restrictions. No stress about timing multiple dishes to finish simultaneously. I started cooking Tuesday morning, moving through each recipe with the unhurried pleasure of someone creating art rather than meeting obligations. Wednesday evening I set my table. One place setting but not in a way that suggested loneliness or abandonment. I positioned my chair at the head of the table, facing the windows that looked out over my back garden. The good china, what remained after Dylan's divorce pillaging, gleamed in the late afternoon light. Fresh flowers from my own garden created a centerpiece that didn't need to accommodate conversation or serving dishes. One wine glass, catching the last rays of November sunshine. It was beautiful, elegant, intentional. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of November day that made bare tree branches look like architectural drawings against a pewter sky. I woke without an alarm, without anxiety, without checking my phone for last-minute cancellations or schedule changes. The house was perfectly quiet except for the soft jazz playing from my kitchen radio and the gentle bubbling of stock simmering on the stove. I dressed carefully, not for anyone else, but because the day felt worthy of ceremony. The burgundy dress I'd bought for myself last month, paired with my mother's pearl earrings. Lipstick applied with the same care I'd once reserved for special occasions with extended family. This was a special occasion, I realized. Just not the kind I'd previously understood. The meal preparation became a dance performed for an audience of one. I basted the turkey while humming along to Duke Ellington. Stirred the cranberry sauce while watching squirrels perform acrobatics outside my window. Arranged rolls in a basket with the same attention to presentation I'd once lavished on dinner parties for 12. At exactly 2 o'clock, the time I'd always served Thanksgiving dinner, I lit a single candle in the center of my table. Not the elaborate candelabra of previous years, but one perfect taper in my grandmother's silver holder. The flame cast dancing shadows across my solitary place setting, transforming what could have looked like sadness into something that felt more like sanctuary. I poured wine, a bottle of Pinot Noir I'd been saving for someday, and raised my glass to the empty chairs that no longer felt accusatory. To Catherine O'Brien Patterson, I said aloud, who taught me that dignity survives everything. And to Morgan Patterson, who finally learned to choose herself. The toast felt silly for exactly 3 seconds, until I realized that speaking my truth out loud, even to an audience of furniture and flickering candlelight, was the most honest thing I'd done in years. The food was perfect. Not because it was flawless, but because every bite reflected my choices, my preferences, my idea of what comfort should taste like. The turkey was herb-crusted rather than traditional. The stuffing contained wild rice instead of white bread. The wine paired beautifully with flavors I'd never been free to explore when cooking for other people's expectations. Halfway through my meal, I began laughing. Not the bitter laughter of last year's abandonment, but genuine amusement at how long it had taken me to discover that cooking for myself could be an act of love rather than resignation. I photographed my plate, not for social media but for memory. This moment deserved documentation. The doorbell rang just as I was considering dessert. For a split second, my heart performed its old familiar leap. Maybe Shane had changed his mind, maybe the family was here after all. But the feeling passed quickly, replaced by mild curiosity rather than desperate hope. Through the peephole, I saw Emma Castellanos from next door, her 8-year-old daughter Sophia beside her, both holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. "Mrs. Patterson." Sophia's voice carried through the door with the enthusiasm only children could generate. "We brought you cookies." I opened the door to find 2 faces glowing with the kind of uncomplicated warmth I'd almost forgotten existed. Emma looked apologetic, Sophia looked delighted. "I hope we're not interrupting," Emma said. "Sophia insisted we bring these over today. She's been talking about you since we moved in." Sophia stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd never learned that approaching neighbors required complicated social calculations. "My mom says you remind her of her grandma in Mexico. She was really nice too, and she always smelled like vanilla." The words hit me with unexpected force. Not the comparison to a grandmother, though that was lovely, but the simple recognition that I existed in someone else's story as a positive presence. That my daily life, my garden tending, my wave from the front porch had registered as kindness in a child's world. "Would you like to come in?" I heard myself asking. I was just having dessert. 20 minutes later, Sophia was explaining her elaborate theory about why squirrels were probably secret agents while her mother and I shared coffee at my kitchen table. The formal dining room felt too ceremonial for this spontaneous connection, but the kitchen, with its warm light and lingering aromas of the day's cooking, felt exactly right. "This house always smells amazing," Emma said, cradling her coffee mug. Sophia asks every time we walk by if we can stop and visit the cookie lady. I don't actually bake that many cookies, I admitted. It's not about the cookies, Emma replied with the wisdom of someone who understood metaphor. It's about feeling welcome. They stayed for an hour, filling my kitchen with conversation that had nothing to do with family obligations or social expectations. Sophia told me about her school play, her pet hamster, her theory that Thanksgiving was really a celebration of squirrels preparing for winter. Emma shared stories about adjusting to small-town life after growing up in Los Angeles, about finding community in unexpected places. When they left, hugging me goodbye with the casual affection of people who plan to see each other again soon, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This Thanksgiving hadn't been about what I'd lost. It had been about what I'd found. Not just peace but possibility. Not just solitude but the freedom to choose my own connections. Later that evening, as I was washing my single-place setting and storing leftovers in containers sized for one person's meals, my phone buzzed with a text from Shane. The kids have been asking about you. Can we set up a visit? I dried my hands carefully before responding, taking time to consider my words. They know where I live. We'll be here. One visit a year unlocks their future. His reply came quickly. What does that mean? It means exactly what it says. Your children are welcome here anytime. You and Marissa are welcome here when you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve. The legal documents you received explain the rest. I turned off my phone without waiting for his response. Whatever he needed to process about the new terms of our relationship could happen on his own time. I had dishes to finish, a candle to blow out, and a profound sense of contentment to savor. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the peaceful aftermath of a perfect Thanksgiving, I understood that I hadn't been seeking revenge at all. I'd been seeking freedom, from their expectations, their casual cruelty, their assumption that my love came without conditions. They taught me that I wasn't the real grandmother. I'd learned that I was something better. A real woman with real boundaries who finally understood that the best relationships were chosen, not assigned. Peace, I discovered, was the most satisfying course of all. If this story of Morgan's perfect revenge had you gripping your phone, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Morgan tore their faces from the family photo and mailed it back with that devastating message. What was your favorite moment of her sweet revenge? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more stories of people who refuse to be walked over. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for your next dose of satisfying justice. She's just a pretty face, my husband, also my boss, laughed during a client meeting, while I poured their drinks like the perfect little assistant. The client smirked. Interesting. Coming from someone who just signed over controlling shares to his wife. The room went dead silent. I raised my glass. Ex-wife, actually. Divorce finalized this morning. I kept the house, the company, and your parking spot. He choked. I smiled sweetly. Next time, read my fine print. The coffee burned my fingers as I poured it into David Harris's cup, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not when Michael's words were still echoing through the conference room. She's just a pretty face, my husband had said with that casual laugh he used when undermining me. Don't mind her. David Harris, a potential client worth millions to our agency, glanced up at me with something like pity in his eyes. I'd spent 14 hours preparing the presentation he would never see. The one Michael had interrupted 3 minutes in to ask me to serve refreshments instead. That's what broke me. Not the interruption, I'd grown used to those. But the realization that I was standing there in my tailored navy suit with coffee dripping onto my wedding ring while the company I had built was being handed to someone else on a silver platter. Just like the coffee I was serving. It wasn't always like this. 6 years ago when I met Michael at the Chicago Marketing Conference, we were equals. More than equals, I was the one with the industry award nominations. He approached me after my panel presentation, all charm and genuine admiration. Your consumer retention strategy is revolutionary, he'd said, extending his business card. I've been trying to solve that exact problem for Peterson Manufacturing. Would you consider collaborating? Collaboration turned to partnership. Partnership turned to romance. Our small marketing firm in Minneapolis grew as our relationship did. For 2 years we were unstoppable, finishing each other's presentations, clients loving our dynamic approach. When he proposed, It felt like the natural progression of everything wonderful we were building together. To Lily, he'd toasted at our small wedding reception at Lake Harriet. My partner in every sense of the word. I didn't notice the changes at first. They were too subtle, too easy to explain away. 3 months after the honeymoon, client meetings began happening when I had other commitments. The Richardsons could only meet during your dentist appointment, he'd explain. No big deal, I took notes for you. The notes grew shorter. Then stopped coming altogether. When I landed the Johnson account, a local restaurant chain I'd pursued for months, Michael took full credit at the office celebration. I confronted him in the kitchen as he refilled the ice bucket. You didn't even attend the final meeting, I said, keeping my voice low. Why did you tell everyone it was your strategy that closed them? Come on, Lily. He kissed my cheek, ice clinking in the bucket between us. We're married now. What's mine is yours, right? Does it really matter whose name is on the contract? 6 months later, he moved my desk from our shared office to the main workspace. I carried my marketing degree and framed industry awards past curious employee eyes. We need the executive office for client meetings, he explained. And you're so good with the team, they need your guidance. The team I had hired and trained now looked to Michael first. My nameplate disappeared from the door the following week. By month's end, our letterhead changed from Michael and Lily Adams co-founders to simply Michael Adams CEO. When I questioned it, his response seemed reasonable on the surface. It's cleaner this way. Less confusing for clients who need a clear chain of command. I began cataloging moments I'd previously overlooked. How he'd place his hand on my lower back during meetings right before interrupting whatever point I was making. The slight chuckle whenever I offered input on strategy. My wife has such creative ideas, he'd say, as if creativity and business acumen couldn't coexist. His parents visited from Phoenix last spring. Over dinner at our home, his father Gordon, whose insurance company had mysteriously never employed his wife of 40 years, provided unwitting clarity. The Williams brothers deal, Gordon reminisced while sawing through his steak. Your mother thought she had insights to share on that one. He laughed, gesturing with his fork. I reminded her there's a reason men handle business matters and women handle home matters. Across the table, Michael's mother Eleanor silently topped off Gordon's wine glass, her eyes never meeting mine. Dad ran a tight ship, Michael said, raising his glass. Learned from the best. I watched something pass between father and son. Approval, continuity, tradition, while Eleanor methodically cut her food into ever smaller pieces. I saw my future sitting across from me, silent and diminished. The introductions to clients evolved so gradually I almost missed the pattern. First, meet my wife and business partner, Lily. Then, this is Lily, my wife, she handles our internal operations. Eventually, our office manager Lily will take care of those details. Each demotion delivered with the same winning smile. Each one erasing another piece of the business I had built. I should have recognized the breaking point earlier. Maybe when he started holding executive strategy sessions, that somehow never included me despite my co-founder status. Or when I discovered my signature was being applied digitally to documents I'd never seen. Or perhaps when Jessica, our new marketing coordinator, came to me confused about why Michael had introduced me as our first employee, when her research had shown I was co-founder. Instead, it took today's meeting with David Harris to fully wake me up. Harris Developments represented the biggest potential client in our company's history, a real estate conglomerate looking for comprehensive rebranding. I'd prepared for weeks, developing concepts specifically tailored to David's vision. 10 minutes into my presentation, Michael cleared his throat. What Lily is trying to say, he jumped in with an indulgent smile, is that we can certainly handle the female demographic targeting while focusing on the serious investment messaging. David frowned slightly but nodded. I continued, showing the market research. Our surveys show that 47% of real estate investment decisions are actually initiated by women, even when. Lily, Michael interrupted, his tone pleasant but firm. We're running low on coffee. Would you mind refreshing everyone before we get to the numbers part? I stood mechanically, taking the coffee carafe from the credenza while Michael smoothly took control of my presentation slides. As I poured coffee into David's cup, Michael leaned back in his chair. Don't worry about all the technical details. She's just a pretty face around here, but we keep her busy. A drop of coffee splashed onto the polished table. I didn't wipe it away. David didn't laugh at Michael's joke. Instead, he watched me with an expression I couldn't quite place, something between curiosity and recognition. I returned to my seat, suddenly seeing everything with perfect clarity. 7 years building this company. 8 years loving this man. All condensed into just a pretty face. As Michael continued talking about market penetration strategies, I wasn't listening. I was mentally reviewing the company bylaws I'd drafted. The ownership structure we'd established. The clauses I'd carefully inserted that Michael had signed without careful reading. After all, why would he bother reading the fine print when dealing with just a pretty face? After that meeting with David Harris, I started seeing our company, and my marriage, with new eyes. The office I once walked into with pride now felt like a stage where I played an increasingly diminished role. But I wasn't ready to exit quietly. The week after the coffee incident, Michael left for a 3-day executive retreat in Chicago. With him gone, I decided to review our quarterly financial reports, something I hadn't done in months. Not because I wasn't interested, but because Michael had gradually taken over all financial oversight, insisting he didn't want to burden me with the boring stuff. I unlocked his office drawer with the spare key I'd never returned and pulled out the manila folders labeled with each quarter. What I found made my stomach drop. Several expenses were categorized oddly. A $23,000 payment listed as equipment upgrade didn't match any office improvements I'd seen. 3 consecutive monthly payments of $4,500 to a company called Westridge Consulting that I'd never heard of. And most concerning, a series of transfers moving significant portions of our profits to an account number I didn't recognize. I photographed everything with my phone, careful to return the folders exactly as I'd found them. That night I couldn't sleep. The numbers swirled in my head, along with a growing suspicion I didn't want to face. 2 weeks later, our neighbors hosted their annual Memorial Day barbecue. I was in the Wilsons' kitchen helping arrange desserts when I heard Michael's laugh from the patio. Through the window I spotted him with Tom Landon, his college friend who occasionally consulted for our firm. "She's completely clueless about the West Side deal," Michael said, lowering his voice but not enough. "And I want to keep it that way." Tom glanced toward the house. "She is still legally co-owner, Mike. Don't you need her signature eventually?" Michael took a swig of beer. "Technically yes. But she signs whatever I put in front of her these days. She's so caught up in her little office projects she doesn't even read the fine print anymore." I turned away, the plate of brownies trembling slightly in my hands. So Westridge Consulting was connected to something called the West Side deal. And Michael was deliberately keeping me in the dark. That night, after Michael fell asleep, I slipped into our home office and logged into his email. His password hadn't changed in years. Our first dog's name followed by his birth year. So predictable, so careless. So convinced of my compliance. The first email appeared 3 months ago from Tom. West Side Branch Office Proposal. Mike. Attached is the revised business plan for West Side Marketing Group. I've updated the revenue projections based on the potential clients you mentioned. If we position this as a separate entity from Adams Marketing Solutions but leverage your existing client relationships, we could be operational by Q4. Once you're ready to pull the trigger, I can connect you with my real estate guy about that River North space we looked at. Prime location for the Chicago market. Let me know when you want to tell Lily. Or if you want my advice, maybe wait until it's a done deal. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission, right? Tom. I scrolled through dozens more emails. Plans for a Chicago branch office under a different name. Detailed discussions about which clients they would transition from our main company. A separate business plan where Michael was listed as sole owner with Tom as COO. My name appeared exactly nowhere. My husband was planning to siphon off our most valuable clients to a new company that would exclude me entirely. The next morning, I checked our joint personal account while Michael was in the shower. We'd always maintained this account for household expenses, with separate accounts for personal spending. The balance was lower than it should have been. Scrolling through the transaction history, I found the reason. Golf club membership renewal $8,000. A weekend at a luxury hotel in Chicago $2,300. A receipt from Tiffany & Co. for $4,750. A purchase I'd never seen. Meanwhile, I'd been cutting back on my own expenses, worried about cash flow after Michael mentioned we needed to tighten our belts last month. I'd canceled my gym membership, started coloring my own hair, brought lunch from home, all while he was spending thousands without discussion. The final piece fell into place a week later. Karen, our company accountant, stopped by my desk with benefits enrollment forms. "Sorry these are late," she apologized, setting the folder beside my keyboard. "Things have been crazy with the restructuring." I looked up from my computer. "Restructuring?" "The share redistribution," she clarified, then hesitated at my expression. "Wait, has Michael not reviewed that with you yet? I assume since the paperwork came through." "I've been swamped," I said carefully. "Refresh my memory on the details." Karen lowered her voice. "The new ownership structure. Michael will hold 60%, Tom Landon gets 25%, and the remaining 15% is distributed among senior management." She frowned. "I thought you would have been first to know, being his wife and co-founder." "Of course," I forced a smile. "Just making sure we're talking about the same paperwork." "Thanks, Karen." After she left, I sat perfectly still at my desk, my mind racing through everything I'd discovered. The separate company, the drained accounts, and now, a planned redistribution of ownership that would dilute my stake from 50% to nothing. I wasn't even included in senior management, apparently. The betrayal was complete, documented in emails, bank statements, and corporate filings. Michael hadn't just been diminishing me professionally, he was systematically erasing my place in the company we'd built together. That evening, I declined a dinner invitation from Michael, claiming a headache. Instead, I drove to the lake where we'd once celebrated landing our first major client. The water rippled under the setting sun as I sat on our favorite bench, my mind unexpectedly calm. I had been a fool, but no longer. The paper trail Michael had carelessly left behind would become my roadmap forward. I pulled out my phone and called an old law school friend, one who specialized in business divorces of both kinds. "Taylor? It's Lily Adams. I need your help with something confidential. How soon can we meet?" As I hung up, I felt something shift inside me, grief giving way to determination. Michael had left a paper trail of betrayal. I would use it to find my way back to myself. I met Taylor at a quiet cafe 20 miles from our office, far from any potential familiar faces. She hadn't changed much since our college days. Still direct, still wearing her signature red-framed glasses, still ordering black coffee with exactly 1 sugar. "So let me get this straight," she said after I laid out everything I'd discovered. "Your husband is systematically pushing you out of your own company while draining your joint finances and planning a new venture that excludes you entirely." "That about covers it," I said, tracing the rim of my untouched latte. Taylor didn't offer sympathy, which was exactly why I'd called her. "You need a crash course in corporate self-defense. Starting now." The next day I changed my lunch routine. Instead of eating with coworkers in the break room, I began taking my sandwich to my car, propping my tablet against the steering wheel. Taylor had sent links to several online business courses: corporate structure and governance, shareholder rights in closely held companies, financial statement analysis. I devoured them like oxygen. Each lunch break became a mini semester in my silent education. I took notes on my phone, careful never to leave a digital trail on company devices. I learned about minority shareholder protections, fiduciary duties between business partners, grounds for proving financial malfeasance. "How was lunch?" Michael would sometimes ask, barely looking up from his computer. "Same as always," I'd reply, the business law terms I'd just learned still buzzing in my head. 3 weeks into my self-education program, I began noticing Jessica, our new marketing coordinator, watching me with curious eyes. One day she followed me to the parking lot. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, tapping on my window. I hesitated, then unlocked the door. Jessica slid into the passenger seat, her lunch in her lap. "I know what you're doing," she said quietly. "And I want you to know you're not alone." She explained how Michael had hired her with promises of growth and creative freedom, only to sideline her ideas and take credit for her work. 2 other employees had similar experiences. A small group of them had started documenting everything. "We don't know what you're planning," Jessica said, "but whatever it is, we want to help." I studied her face, searching for any sign this was a trap. "Michael underestimates people he considers beneath him," she added. "That's his weakness." That afternoon, I asked Jessica to gather some old contract files, watching as Michael barely registered her presence when she entered his office. Invisible just like me. A potential ally I never would have noticed if I hadn't become invisible myself. With Jessica's help, I gained access to the complete archive of company contracts. For 3 nights straight after Michael had fallen asleep, I sat in our home office reviewing every document we'd ever signed. In the original formation documents, buried in section 12.4b, I found what I was looking for. Any transfer of shares exceeding 15% of total company ownership requires written consent from all original signing partners. I read it 3 times to be sure. Michael couldn't legally redistribute ownership without my signature, not even with digital authorization. The clause had been my idea years ago when we were just starting out, to protect us both from outside investors. Now it was my lifeline. During the day, I maintained the perfect facade of the supportive wife and compliant employee. I brought Michael his favorite lunch, listened attentively in meetings, and never questioned his decisions publicly. At home, I prepared dinner, asked about his day, and pretended not to notice when he made late-night phone calls from our back porch. "You seem different lately," he commented one evening as I handed him a glass of wine. "More relaxed." I smiled, thinking of the consultation I'd had with Sarah, my college friend who now specialized in high-asset divorce cases, just that afternoon. "Just accepting my place, I guess," I replied. The following week, I received an unexpected email from David Harris requesting a private meeting to discuss some creative approaches to his company's marketing needs. I showed Michael the message. "Odd that he'd reach out to you directly," Michael frowned, clearly annoyed. "I'll take the meeting." "Actually," I said carefully, "he specifically mentioned wanting my input on female consumer targeting. Might be better if I handle this one." Michael hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. Just don't make any commitments without running them by me first." I met David at a downtown coffee shop, expecting a brief, perfunctory discussion about demographics. Instead, he got straight to the point. "I've done my research on Adam's marketing," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "including your role in building it." Inside was a printout of an industry article from 3 years ago, featuring Michael and me as marketing's power couple. My name was highlighted in every paragraph where our achievements were discussed. "I recognize talent when I see it," David continued. "And I recognize when talent is being wasted." What happened? For a moment I considered maintaining the facade. Then I looked into David's direct gaze and decided on a calculated risk. "Business partnerships evolve," I said carefully. "Sometimes in unexpected directions." "And marriages?" I didn't answer directly. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Harris?" "2 things. First, I want you, not your husband, to handle my account. Second, I want to know your plans." "Pie plans?" "I've been in business 30 years, Mrs. Adams. I know when someone's preparing for a significant change. The question is whether I want to be on the right or wrong side of that change." I considered my options, then made a decision. I might be considering a restructuring of my own, but I'm still researching the possibilities. David nodded, seemingly satisfied. Harris Developments values forward-thinking leadership. When you're ready to discuss possibilities further, my private line is on the back of my card. As we parted ways, I realized I'd gained something unexpected in my education. Not just knowledge or allies, but a potential future beyond the company Michael was trying to steal from me. That night, I added David's number to my growing list of resources while Michael snored beside me, blissfully unaware that his dismissive introduction weeks ago had opened a door he couldn't close. The perfect little assistant was learning quickly, and some lessons would cost him everything. As summer turned to fall, Michael's confidence ballooned into something bordering on recklessness. He began leaving important documents in plain sight. Acquisition plans, client lists for the Chicago office, even the draft of the new company structure showing the redistribution of ownership. There was a certain freedom in being underestimated. He no longer bothered hiding things from someone he considered irrelevant. "You'll have the quarterly reports ready by Friday, right?" he asked one evening as we prepared dinner, chopping vegetables side by side in our kitchen. The domesticity of the scene almost made me laugh. Here we were, playing house while he planned to dismantle everything we'd built together. "Of course," I replied, sliding diced onions into the pan. "Along with the client satisfaction surveys you wanted." "Good girl," he said, patting my shoulder as though praising a child. I need everything perfect for next week's board meeting. David Harris is bringing his executive team. I kept my face neutral, though my grip tightened on the knife. The whole team? That sounds promising. It's practically signed, Michael boasted, reaching for his wine glass. Harris called me personally to say he's ready to move forward. This deal will put me on the map in Chicago. Me. The casual correction said everything about how he viewed our partnership now. You've worked hard for this, I said, which wasn't a lie. He preened at the compliment. Sometimes I think you're the only one who really sees that. Tom keeps pushing for more equity in the new venture, but he doesn't understand what it takes to be the face of a company. I nodded sympathetically while mentally adding Tom's dissatisfaction to my growing list of leverage points. Michael had a talent for creating disgruntled allies. The following morning, I called Sarah from my car in the grocery store parking lot. I'm ready, I told her. How quickly can we file? The papers are prepared, she replied. We just need your signature. When do you want to pull the trigger? I thought of the board meeting scheduled for next Tuesday, where Michael planned to announce the Harris deal and likely hint at the Chicago expansion, achievements he fully intended to claim as his alone. Monday, I decided. I want it done Monday morning. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Jessica had provided documentation of Michael backdating contracts. Karen, our accountant, had hesitantly confirmed suspicions about financial improprieties after I'd approached her with specific questions about expense categories that didn't add up. And 2 other senior employees had come forward with evidence of Michael taking credit for their work while cutting them out of commission structures he'd promised. Most importantly, I'd secured copies of all original formation documents proving my equal ownership, along with proof that I'd never signed off on any transfer of shares, making any attempted redistribution a clear violation of our operating agreement. Meanwhile, I'd quietly moved half of our joint savings into a separate account, legally permissible as a spouse according to Sarah, and documented every questionable personal expense Michael had charged to the company over the past year. On Friday, Taylor met me for lunch at a restaurant near her office to review our strategy one final time. The timing is critical, she emphasized. The divorce papers will be served Monday morning at the office. The temporary restraining order preventing him from making major business decisions will be filed simultaneously. Then at Tuesday's board meeting, I present the evidence of financial misconduct, I finished, and invoke the clause requiring my signature for any share transfers. Taylor nodded approvingly. You'll effectively block both the Chicago venture and the redistribution of company shares. But are you ready for his reaction? It won't be pretty. I thought about 7 years of gradual erasure, of watching my contributions be dismissed and my presence diminished until I was nothing more than the woman who poured the coffee. I'm ready, I said. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I rehearsed what I would say at the board meeting, practiced keeping my expression neutral when Michael inevitably tried to dismiss me, and prepared separate folders for each board member containing documentation of everything I'd discovered. Michael spent Saturday golfing with Tom and Sunday working in his home office, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. When he asked me to iron his favorite blue shirt for Tuesday's meeting, I did so without complaint, pressing perfect creases into the fabric that would clothe him during his downfall. Monday morning arrived with a crystalline autumn clarity. We drove to work separately, me claiming an early meeting, him stopping for his usual workout at the gym. I arrived at the office first, nodding calmly to the receptionist as I passed. At 9:17 a.m., just as Michael stepped out of the elevator, a courier approached him. Michael Adams? The young man asked, extending an envelope. I watched from the coffee station, my hand steady as I stirred cream into my cup. Michael's confusion turned to shock as he skimmed the contents. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the office until they locked on mine. For perhaps the first time in years, he actually saw me, not as an accessory or an assistant but as an adversary. He stormed toward me, divorce papers clutched in his hand. What the hell is this? Exactly what it looks like, I replied quietly. I believe Section 4 outlines the division of assets, including my 50% stake in Adams Marketing Solutions. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, his face flushing. You can't possibly think. The office had gone silent, all pretense of work abandoned as everyone watched our confrontation unfold. I don't think, Michael. I know. I picked up my coffee cup and turned toward my desk. Oh, and you might want to call Tom. He'll be receiving similar papers about the West Side deal. Forming a competing business using existing company resources while still employed as an officer? That violates at least 3 clauses in his contract. Michael followed me, lowering his voice to a furious whisper. You won't get away with this. You're nothing without me, nothing but a pretty face playing at business. I smiled, genuinely amused at his predictability. We'll see who's playing tomorrow, won't we? David Harris and the board are expecting quite a show. He spent the rest of the day barricaded in his office, phone calls audible even through the closed door. I calmly completed my work, finalized preparations for the board meeting, and left at exactly 5 o'clock, nodding politely to colleagues still wide-eyed from the morning's drama. Tuesday dawned bright and cool. I dressed with particular care, a charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. Armor for the battle ahead. As I applied my lipstick in the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who had poured coffee while being humiliated weeks ago. She had edges now. Purpose. And most importantly, power that had been there all along, waiting to be reclaimed. I arrived early to prepare the boardroom, arranging folders at each seat, setting up coffee and water. When Michael entered, his confident stride faltered at the sight of me already there, perfectly composed. This changes nothing, he hissed as board members began arriving. I simply smiled and picked up the coffee carafe, ready to play my role one last time. The boardroom filled quickly with nervous energy. Our 4 board members took their usual seats, followed by David Harris and 2 executives from his team. Michael entered last, impeccably dressed in the blue shirt I'd ironed, his smile firmly in place despite the slight twitch in his left eye, a tell I'd learned to recognize over the years whenever he felt cornered. Gentlemen, he greeted everyone, pointedly ignoring me as I quietly poured coffee for the attendees. Thank you for joining us for this momentous occasion. My hands were steady as I moved around the table, filling each cup with practiced precision. This role, the silent, decorative wife, had been my prison. Today it would become my weapon. Before we discuss the Harris Development Partnership, Michael continued, I'd like to announce some exciting structural changes to Adams Marketing Solutions. As you know, expanding to Chicago has been our goal for some time. Today, I'm pleased to share that we've secured a prime location in River North and will be launching West Side Marketing Group next quarter. He clicked through his slides, showcasing the gleaming new office space and projected revenue streams, all while carefully avoiding any mention of my conspicuous absence from the new venture's leadership. This strategic expansion, Michael pressed on, will require some restructuring of our current ownership model. I took my position at the side of the room, coffee carafe still in hand, and waited. I've prepared documents outlining the new distribution of shares, Michael said, nodding to his assistant to pass out folders. You'll see that this creates opportunities for senior leadership to gain equity stakes while concentrating decision-making authority for more efficient operations. David Harris flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. The other board members exchanged glances, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Questions? Michael asked, his confidence visibly returning as no one immediately objected. I have one, I said, setting down the coffee carafe. Michael's smile tightened. Perhaps we should address board questions first, Lily. Mine is relevant to the documents you've just distributed, I replied, walking to my chair at the table, the one Michael had clearly not expected me to occupy. Specifically regarding Section 12.4b of our original operating agreement. The board chairman, Robert Wilson, adjusted his glasses. Which states what exactly? That any transfer of shares exceeding 15% of total company ownership requires written consent from all original signing partners, I answered, opening my own folder. I've highlighted it on page 3 of the documents I've provided. Michael's face darkened as the board members opened the packets I'd prepared. What is this? Demanded Frank Peterson, our most senior board member. Evidence, I replied calmly. Financial records showing unauthorized transfers to accounts associated with West Side Marketing Group. Communications detailing plans to divert clients and resources. And most importantly, proof that I never signed any authorization for the share transfers Mr. Adams just proposed. This is absurd, Michael cut in. My wife is clearly upset about our personal issues. Ex-wife, I corrected. The divorce was finalized this morning through an expedited proceeding. And these aren't personal issues, but fiduciary violations that directly impact this company's future and your investments, gentlemen. David Harris leaned forward. I'd like to hear Ms. Adams out. For the next 17 minutes, I presented the evidence I'd gathered, clearly, methodically, without emotion. The unauthorized financial transfers. The secret formation of a competing business using company resources. The backdated documents. Through it all, Michael's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, dawning horror. Additionally, I continued, while reviewing our bylaws with legal counsel, we discovered that Michael's attempt to transfer controlling interest without proper authorization triggered Clause 23, the bad faith provision. This automatically converts temporary controlling interest to the non-violating partner, me, pending board review. I slid the final document across the table. A legal verification signed by 2 corporate attorneys and notarized that morning. She's making this up, Michael finally sputtered. She's just the office manager, for God's sake. David Harris raised an eyebrow. Actually, according to every document I've reviewed before considering this partnership, she's your co-founder with equal ownership. Unless those materials were misrepresentations. The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone. Michael's face had gone ashen. Gentlemen, I said, addressing the board, I'm not asking you to choose sides in a divorce. I'm asking you to recognize an attempted corporate theft and take appropriate action to protect this company's future. Robert Wilson removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. I believe we need to call an emergency executive session. Mr. and Ms. Adams, if you would step outside. Just one moment, David Harris interrupted, turning to Michael. You assured me this partnership was on solid ground. That everyone key to its success was on board. He shifted his gaze to me. Is Harris Developments still welcome in this new arrangement, Ms. Adams? I met his eyes steadily. Absolutely. But with transparent terms and proper oversight. I'd be happy to rework the proposal to reflect actual market rates rather than the inflated figures you were presented. Harris nodded, something like respect flickering across his face. I look forward to those discussions. This is ridiculous, Michael snapped, desperation cracking through his polished veneer. She's just a pretty face. Tell them, David, tell them who you've been negotiating with all along. The client smirked. Interesting, coming from someone who just signed over controlling shares to his wife. The room went dead silent. I picked up my water glass, fighting to keep my expression neutral as years of dismissal and humiliation finally found their counterbalance. Ex-wife actually, I corrected, raising my glass slightly. Divorce finalized this morning. I kept the house, the company, and your parking spot, Michael. He choked on nothing, his face flushing crimson. I smiled, sweet as saccharine. Next time read my fine print. The aftermath unfolded in waves. The board emerged from their closed session with a unanimous decision to honor the legal transfer of controlling interest, placing me as interim CEO while they conducted a more thorough financial investigation. Michael was escorted from the building by security, his key card deactivated before he reached the parking lot. Word spread through the office like wildfire. Jessica was the first to appear at my new office door, Michael's former space, with a bottle of champagne and tears in her eyes. We knew you were up to something, she said, but this is magnificent. Others followed, some jubilant, some wary, all curious about what would happen next. I addressed the entire staff that afternoon, standing at the front of the conference room where I'd been humiliated so many times. Changes are coming, I told them, but not the ones you might have feared. No mass layoffs. No Chicago office at the expense of Minneapolis operations. Instead, we're going to rebuild this company on transparency, merit, and genuine collaboration. My first actions as CEO focused on stability. I promoted Jessica to creative director, a position she deserved for months. I initiated audits of all client accounts to ensure proper billing. I met individually with each employee to assess concerns and gather ideas for improvement. The company didn't just survive the transition, it thrived. Within 3 months, we'd retained every major client and added 2 new ones. David Harris not only stayed but expanded his contract, personally referring 3 other businesses to us. You understand value, he told me over lunch one day. Both in business and in yourself. That's rarer than it should be. The personal transformation proved more challenging than the professional one. Years of systematic diminishment had left deeper scars than I'd realized. I started therapy, began reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, even took up kickboxing, feeling my strength return with each jab and cross. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, I barely recognized my life. The company had its most profitable quarter ever. I'd moved from our suburban house to a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and no trace of Michael's preferred beige-on-beige aesthetic. My confidence had returned, not as arrogance but as quiet certainty in my own worth. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. "Michael Adams is asking to see you," she said, her tone suggesting she'd be happy to send him packing. Curiosity won over caution. "Send him in." He entered hesitantly, looking both familiar and foreign. 6 months had etched new lines around his eyes, and his designer suit hung slightly loose on his frame. "Lily," he nodded, remaining standing even when I gestured toward a chair. "You're looking well. What can I do for you, Michael?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm launching a new consulting practice. Small scale, nothing that would compete directly with Adams Marketing. Still using the name, I see." "It's mine too," he said defensively, then caught himself. "Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm bidding on the Westridge account, and they're asking for references from previous major clients." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here he stood, asking for my help to rebuild what he'd tried to steal from me. "What exactly are you asking? A reference letter? Or just permission to list Adams Marketing as a previous affiliation?" I studied him, searching for the man I'd once loved, the partner I'd once trusted. He wasn't there. In his place stood someone I barely recognized and no longer feared. "I'll have Jessica draft something appropriate," I said finally. "Basic confirmation of dates and role. Nothing more, nothing less." Relief washed over his face. "Thank you. I appreciate it." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Michael, the nameplate from your parking spot? I had it framed. It hangs in my office at home." His expression tightened, but he said nothing as he walked out of my office and my life. I turned back to my window, gazing out at the Minneapolis skyline. The view reminded me of how far I'd come, not just from being the woman who poured the coffee, but from being the woman who allowed herself to be diminished in the first place. Some lessons come at a steep price. But as it turned out, I was very good at reading the fine print, and writing my own terms. Did Lily's revenge story resonate with you? That moment when the underestimated finally triumphs is something we all crave. Subscribe for more empowering stories, hit like if you felt that sweet satisfaction, and comment which moment gave you the biggest yes feeling. Don't miss our next revenge tale. His mistress DM'd me their photos with the caption, "He's leaving you and taking the money." By the time she hit send, I'd already emptied every account in his name. Then I forwarded everything to his business partners. They froze his assets before dessert. His scream when the card declined? The sweetest sound of my life. The notification lit up my phone at 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. A name I didn't recognize. Sadie, with a message request that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of my life. I remember staring at those preview words with a strange detachment. "He's leaving you and taking the money." My thumb hovered over the screen, time suspended in that moment before I let the bomb detonate. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I looked up at the framed accolades on the wall of my home office. Hudson Mercer, founding partner, legal genius, community pillar. My husband's smiling face in every photo, and me, Alice Mercer, the supportive shadow just beyond the frame's edge. 15 years of marriage, 13 years building Mercer Legal from a desperate dream in our garage apartment to the most sought-after boutique firm in the city. Before we continue Alice's journey of discovery and revenge, I want to take a moment to connect with you all. If stories of women reclaiming their power from those who underestimate them resonate with you, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps our community grow. Now let's dive in. The message could wait 5 more minutes. I calmly opened another browser tab, entered our banking credentials. Credentials Hudson didn't even know I maintained, and transferred every last cent from our joint accounts to the separate one I'd established 6 months ago when the first unexplained dinner receipt fell from his pocket. When I finally opened Sadie's message, I wasn't surprised by the intimate photos or her smug certainty. I was only surprised by her timing. By the time she hit send, I'd already emptied every account in his name. Some people might call it paranoia, but I call it survival instinct. For 13 years, I'd built Hudson's legal practice alongside him, though you'd never know it from the firm's letterhead or website. I scheduled his clients, researched precedents until my eyes burned, drafted preliminary documents, kept the books immaculate, and maintained our home as the perfect entertaining space for wooing potential clients. All while Hudson collected the accolades, the handshakes, the professional respect. "You're the backbone of this operation, Alice," he'd say, kissing my forehead like I was a child who'd brought home a good report card. Not a partner. Never an equal. I still remember the night we celebrated the firm's first major victory, a complex civil case nobody thought he could win. While Hudson accepted congratulations from the senior partners who'd taken a chance on him, I circulated with champagne flutes and memorized the names of spouses and children, making mental notes about client preferences and potential conflicts. I was building a database in my mind while building a reputation for being the perfect hostess. "You should hire an assistant," I suggested once during our 3rd year when the workload became crushing. Hudson laughed, his hand warm against my cheek. "Why would I pay someone to do what you already do so perfectly, honey? We're building our future together." Our future. That phrase became the carrot dangled before me through missed anniversaries, cancelled vacations, and the gradual postponement of the family we'd planned. First until the firm was stable, then until he made partner, then until they opened the downtown office. Always tomorrow, always after the next big milestone. The first sign something had changed wasn't the late nights. Those were nothing new. It was the subtle shift in Hudson's scent when he returned home. The faint trace of something floral beneath his cologne that wasn't from any product in our bathroom. Then came the unexplained weekend conferences that appeared on no industry calendars. Small changes in routine that might seem innocuous to anyone else but glared like warning lights to someone who'd spent 15 years studying his habits. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that successful marriages required trust. Then I noticed the first financial discrepancy. It was just $200 at first. A cash withdrawal that Hudson hadn't mentioned, unusual since we discussed all major expenses. Then another $350 the following week. Small enough to explain away, large enough to create a pattern. My accounting background, the very skill that had helped Hudson establish his firm with immaculate books, now turned toward tracking these unexplained leakages from our shared future. Every night after Hudson fell asleep, I'd slip into the home office and meticulously document each suspicious transaction. A dinner charge at the Westlake on a night he claimed to be working late at the office. A jewelry purchase from Ellison's that never materialized as a gift for me. Hotel charges in our own city. The growing spreadsheet became my secret shame, evidence of either my husband's betrayal or my own paranoid breakdown. "You seem distracted lately," Hudson mentioned one evening as I prepared dinner, the chopping knife striking the cutting board with more force than necessary. "Is everything okay at the volunteer center?" The volunteer center. My supposed focus now that the firm had grown enough to hire actual paralegals and assistants. The convenient explanation for why I wasn't needed at the office anymore, though I still maintained their financial records remotely. Hudson had successfully transitioned me out of his professional life while keeping me tied to his finances. "Everything's fine," I lied, matching the practiced ease with which he delivered his own untruths. "Just thinking about the Blackwell dinner next month. It's a big opportunity." His eyes lit up at the mention of Blackwell Industries, the potential client that could cement Mercer Legal's reputation in corporate law. "That's my girl, always thinking ahead. This account could transform everything for us." As if we were still a team. That night, while reaching for Hudson's suit jacket to take it for dry cleaning, I heard the distinctive buzz of a second phone. Not his regular iPhone that occasionally contained work texts I was allowed to see, but something else hidden in his interior pocket. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs as my fingers traced the outline of the device. Just as quickly I withdrew my hand, leaving the jacket untouched. Some truths require careful preparation before confrontation. The following evening I volunteered to pick up dinner while Hudson worked in his study. Instead of driving directly to the restaurant, I parked across the street, called our landline and asked for Hudson. "He just stepped away, Mrs. Mercer," our part-time housekeeper answered. "Would you like me to have him call you back?" "No need," I replied, watching through binoculars as Hudson emerged from the house, phone pressed to his ear, walking toward the garden where he thought privacy awaited. I couldn't hear his words, but his body language told the story. The intimate lean, the occasional laugh, the way his free hand gestured as if touching someone. 20 minutes of watching my husband perform affection for someone else was all the confirmation I needed. I drove to the restaurant, ordered our usual Tuesday meals, and returned home with a pleasant smile fixed firmly in place. That night, as Hudson slept beside me, I made my decision. There would be no confrontation, no tearful demands for explanation or promises to change. Instead, I would do what I'd always done best. Work silently behind the scenes, gathering information, preparing documents, and building a case. Only this time, Hudson would be on the receiving end of my meticulous attention to detail. The Blackwell dinner was exactly 4 weeks away. I had learned patience during 15 years of marriage to an ambitious man. I could wait another month to serve the coldest dish of all. The morning after my garden surveillance, I woke before Hudson and slipped into my home office with a cup of coffee. The Blackwell dinner preparation gave me the perfect excuse to dig deeper into our finances. After all, the firm needed to appear impeccably stable to land this client. Logging into our premium credit card account, I scrolled through recent transactions, something catching my eye that I hadn't noticed before. A $4,200 charge from Tiffany & Company 3 weeks ago. My birthday had passed months earlier. Our anniversary wasn't for another 2 months. I checked my jewelry box that evening. No blue box awaited me there. Whoever wore the gift from Tiffany's, it wasn't the woman who'd helped build Hudson's success from nothing. The charge was followed by weekend hotel bookings in nearby Oak Ridge, a luxury resort area just an hour away, and restaurant charges for 2 at places I'd never visited. I printed everything, creating a detailed timeline in a password-protected file on my personal laptop. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. My contributions to our shared life were literally funding Hudson's escape from it. I remembered how I'd once joked that I knew the firm's accounting better than Hudson did. "That's why I married the smartest woman I know," he'd responded, kissing my forehead. The memory burned now as I discovered a pattern of increasing withdrawals from our joint savings. $500 here, $800 there. All in cash that couldn't be easily traced. The following Tuesday, while Hudson attended court, I called in sick to my volunteer position and spent the morning searching our home. Years of organizing Hudson's life had taught me his habits, his hiding places. The locked drawer in his bedside table yielded nothing unusual, just the expected collection of cufflinks and watches I'd given him over the years. The false bottom in his closet shoe rack contained only the predictable passport and birth certificate. I was about to give up when I noticed something odd about his golf bag, untouched since the previous season. Hudson hadn't played in months, claiming work was too demanding. The bag felt heavier than it should. In the side pocket, wrapped in a hand towel from the Oak Ridge Grand Hotel, I found a small leather notebook. Inside were handwritten calculations, projections of living expenses, investment returns, and what appeared to be a division of assets. My name appeared nowhere in these careful plans. Instead, there were notes about clean extraction and untraceable funds. Most disturbing was a notation beside several client account numbers, available liquidity before transfer restrictions. My hands trembled as I photographed every page before returning the notebook exactly as I'd found it. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to steal from his clients. 2 days later, Sadie's message arrived. I'd been preparing a grocery list for the Blackwell dinner when my phone chimed with the notification from an unknown Instagram account. The preview showed just enough to freeze my blood. "He's leaving you and taking the money. Thought you should see what your husband's been up to." After securing our accounts, I finally opened the full message. There were 5 photos. Hudson and a young woman with sleek dark hair, wrapped around each other in various states of undress in what I recognized as the Oak Ridge Grand's premier suite. His expression in each image held something I hadn't seen directed at me in years, pure, unfiltered desire. The woman, Sadie, wore the diamond pendant I'd seen charged to our account. "I'm 28, fertile, and not afraid to go after what I want," her message continued. Hudson's tired of waiting for you to give him children. We're starting fresh with the money he's been setting aside. He's just wrapping up some client matters first. You can make this easy or difficult, but he's already chosen me. The phone slipped from my fingers onto the kitchen tile, screen shattering in a pattern that matched the breaking inside my chest. A sound escaped me that I didn't recognize, part sob, part animal keening, as I slid down against the refrigerator to the floor. 13 years of sacrifice, of being the perfect partner, reduced to a disposable obstacle. The betrayal was complete, meticulously planned, and breathtakingly cruel. I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of breakdown. 10 minutes to feel the full force of the devastation, to let the tears come without restraint. Then I washed my face, made a fresh cup of coffee, and began to think like the strategic partner I'd always been. First, I needed access to Hudson's devices. The phone in his pocket would be impossible to examine without raising suspicion, but the tablet he often left charging in his study might yield information. Hudson, like many successful men, maintained the illusion of security while practicing the laziest form of it, using variations of the same password across accounts. The tablet unlocked on my third attempt, our wedding date followed by his mother's birth year. Inside, his email revealed everything. Draft messages to Sadie outlined their escape plan. Hudson had been systematically moving client funds through a complex series of transfers, preparing for what he called their fresh start. The Blackwell dinner wasn't just a business opportunity. It was to be his final performance before disappearing with nearly $2 million in client funds. The new identities, the property in Costa Rica, the offshore accounts, everything meticulously detailed in correspondence he thought no one would ever see. Most crushing was an email draft addressed to me, scheduled to send the morning after the Blackwell dinner. Alice, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The firm will be facing some financial irregularities that I've had to leave behind. I'm sorry it ended this way, but we both know our marriage has been just a business arrangement for years. I've found real happiness now and deserve to start over. The house is underwater anyway, you can deal with the bank. The tablet nearly slipped from my hands as I processed the magnitude of his betrayal. Hudson hadn't just planned to leave me. He'd arranged for me to be left holding the bag for his financial crimes. The woman who had built his success would be left to face his creditors, his angry clients, and possible criminal charges while he sipped cocktails on a beach with my replacement. I forwarded everything to my secure email account, careful to delete the sent message and restore the tablet exactly as I'd found it. Then I printed key documents and placed them in a safety deposit box Hudson knew nothing about. The bank manager nodded politely as I completed the paperwork, unaware that I was assembling evidence that would destroy the man whose name I carried. That night, I served Hudson his favorite meal and asked about his day, smiling as he lied about a business meeting I now knew had been a rendezvous with Sadie. As he spoke, I studied his face, the face I'd woken up to for 15 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. A dangerous stranger who was willing to sacrifice me alongside his professional ethics. The Blackwell dinner is going to change everything for us, he said, raising his wine glass in a toast. For once, Hudson and I were in perfect agreement. The Blackwell dinner is going to change everything for us, Hudson had said. He had no idea how right he was. As I cleared the dinner dishes that night, I reflected on the irony of my situation. Most of Hudson's colleagues had no idea that I held a master's degree in financial accounting or that I'd walked away from a promising career at Deloitte to help build Mercer Legal from scratch. The narrative Hudson presented to the world was simple. He was the brilliant legal mind and I was the supportive wife who organized charity luncheons and remembered everyone's children's names. No one knew that I had personally designed the firm's entire financial system, or that I still remotely monitored all account activity through secure access protocols I'd established years ago. Hudson himself had forgotten that I'd set up the original server passwords and administration rights. When the firm hired their first full-time accountant 3 years back, I'd trained him myself but maintained backdoor access, just in case of emergency. The emergency had arrived in the form of a diamond pendant around Sadie's neck and a Costa Rican escape plan. The following morning I began moving in parallel tracks. On the surface I was the perfect corporate wife preparing for the Blackwell dinner, calling caterers, selecting wine pairings and coordinating with the event planner Hudson had insisted we hire to impress these potential clients. Beneath this flawless exterior, I was meticulously documenting every unauthorized transfer Hudson had made over the past 6 months. The flower arrangements need to be impressive but not ostentatious, I explained to the florist on my cell phone while simultaneously using my laptop to download transaction records showing Hudson's gradual siphoning of funds from the client trust accounts. The Blackwells appreciate subtle elegance, not flashy displays. Much like Hudson himself, who had perfected the art of appearing trustworthy while plotting grand theft. By mid-afternoon, I had compiled a comprehensive spreadsheet tracking every diverted dollar. The pattern was clear. Hudson had been testing the waters with small transfers before growing bolder. The most recent transfers were masked as legitimate case expenses but were actually being routed to a holding account before disappearing into the offshore network he'd established. I downloaded everything, saving copies to multiple secure locations. The next step required careful timing. I needed to contact Joseph Winters, the senior partner who had originally mentored Hudson without raising suspicion. Joseph had semi-retired 2 years earlier but still maintained considerable influence in the firm and the broader legal community. More importantly, his reputation for ethical practice was unimpeachable. "Alice, what a pleasant surprise," Joseph said when I called. "Please tell me Hudson finally convinced you to take that European vacation you've been postponing for years." I laughed, the sound almost natural despite the circumstances. "Not quite yet, Joseph. Actually, I'm calling about the Blackwell dinner. I was hoping Margaret might share her grandmother's chocolate soufflé recipe. I remember how much everyone raved about it at your anniversary party. I'm sure she'd be delighted. Why don't you stop by tomorrow afternoon? Margaret would love to see you, and I've been meaning to discuss something with Hudson about the Patterson case anyway." Perfect. An innocent reason to visit without raising Hudson's suspicions, and an opportunity to plant seeds of concern with the one person whose opinion Hudson truly valued. That evening, I casually mentioned to Hudson that I'd be visiting the Winters the following day. "Margaret's going to share her chocolate soufflé recipe for the Blackwell dinner. Joseph mentioned he wants to discuss the Patterson case with you too. Should I relay anything specific?" Hudson frowned slightly. "Patterson case? That's odd. That matter was settled months ago." I shrugged with practiced nonchalance. "Maybe he's just being nostalgic. You know how he gets about his old cases now that he's semi-retired." "Probably," Hudson agreed, already distracted by his phone. Likely another message from Sadie. "Tell him I'll call him this weekend." A call that would never happen if my timeline proceeded as planned. The next day, I arrived at the Winters' comfortable suburban home with a small gift basket and my most convincing smile. Margaret welcomed me warmly, but I could tell immediately that Joseph had concerns beyond soufflé recipes. "Alice," he said after preliminary pleasantries, "is everything all right with Hudson? With the firm?" I hesitated just long enough to appear conflicted rather than calculated. "What makes you ask that, Joseph?" "Call it an old lawyer's intuition. The Blackwell account is a tremendous opportunity, but Hudson seems unusually urgent about finalizing everything immediately after the dinner. Most corporate clients of that size take weeks to formalize their legal representation." I stirred my tea, allowing my hand to tremble slightly. "Hudson's been under a lot of pressure lately. He doesn't share much of the firm's business with me anymore, but I've noticed some changes." "What kind of changes?" "Probably nothing," I said, my voice carefully modulated to suggest it was very much something. "He's been working unusual hours, taking calls in private. I'm sure it's just the stress of the Blackwell presentation." Joseph's expression told me he'd taken the bait. The seed of doubt had been planted, not enough to trigger immediate action, but sufficient to make him receptive when the evidence arrived in his inbox the night of the dinner. On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and purchased a small but powerful device that would allow me to clone Hudson's work phone when he was sleeping. The tech-savvy college student who sold it to me assured me it would bypass most standard security measures. I also bought a new laptop with cash, one Hudson would never know existed. That night, I worked late in my home office, ostensibly finalizing dinner preparations while actually establishing remote access to every financial account Hudson controlled. I created digital tripwires that would alert me to any large transfers and prepared a series of countercommands that could be executed with a single keystroke. The most challenging part was maintaining my composure during daily interactions with Hudson. Each morning, I prepared his favorite breakfast and listened to his plans for the day, knowing many of them involved Sadie. Each evening, I asked about work while secretly monitoring which client accounts he'd accessed. Each night, I lay beside him in bed, calculating exactly how I would dismantle the life he planned to steal from me. 3 days before the Blackwell dinner, Hudson came home with an expensive bottle of champagne and a rare display of affection. "What's the occasion?" I asked as he poured 2 glasses. "Just appreciating my brilliant wife," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "I couldn't have built any of this without you, Alice. After the Blackwell dinner, I think we should discuss taking that European vacation you've always wanted." I smiled, knowing this would be the last champagne we'd ever share. "That sounds wonderful. I've always wanted to see the world with you." The irony wasn't lost on me. His final manipulation was to make me feel valued just before he planned to discard me. Little did he know that while he plotted his escape with a younger woman, I had already ensured that the only place he'd be going after the Blackwell dinner was financial ruin. The woman behind his money was about to step into the spotlight, and Hudson had no idea his audience was about to witness his final act. The evening of the Blackwell dinner arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and a gentle breeze that rustled through the Japanese maple trees surrounding the private dining room at Everett's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I'd selected everything personally: hand-calligraphed place cards, locally sourced seasonal flowers arranged in understated crystal vases, and a menu that balanced impressive with approachable. The private room glowed with amber lighting that flattered every face, making everyone appear more vibrant, more successful. Looking around as the first guests arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This room represented the culmination of 15 years spent creating the perfect backdrop for Hudson's ambitions. Tonight would be my final performance as the devoted corporate wife, and my debut as the architect of his downfall. I wore a classic black dress with a single strand of pearls Hudson had given me on our 10th anniversary. My makeup was flawless, my hair arranged in a sophisticated updo that had taken 40 minutes to perfect. No one looking at me would suspect that beneath my composed exterior lay a tactical command center. My new phone was tucked into an inner pocket of my clutch, programmed with timed commands set to execute throughout the evening. "Alice, you've outdone yourself," remarked Gregory Blackwell as he entered with his wife, Rebecca. The billionaire industrialist looked exactly as his magazine profiles suggested: silver-haired, fitness-obsessed, and perpetually evaluating everyone around him for potential value. "Hudson promised us an exceptional evening, but this is remarkable." "You're too kind," I replied, taking Rebecca's hand warmly. "Hudson and I believe that attention to detail reflects how we approach everything in life." I caught his eye meaningfully. "Including client relationships." Hudson appeared at my side, clapping Gregory on the shoulder with practiced familiarity. "Greg, I see you've met the secret weapon of Mercer Legal. Alice makes everything look effortless." "A woman's touch makes all the difference," Rebecca commented, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. I smiled, knowing none of them realized just how much of a difference my touch would make tonight. More guests arrived. The senior partners from Hudson's firm with their spouses, key executives from Blackwell Industries, and a few strategic connections Hudson had insisted on including. Joseph Winters entered last, his shrewd eyes taking in the room before settling on me with a slight nod. He knew something was coming, he just didn't know what. As cocktail hour progressed, I excused myself to check on dinner arrangements, and slipped into the restaurant's private office that the manager had allowed me to use for last-minute coordination. There, I activated the first phase of my plan. With a few taps on my hidden phone, I initiated transfers canceling Hudson's elaborate network of offshore movements. Another series of commands sent evidence packages to the inboxes of every partner in the firm, scheduled to arrive precisely as dessert was being served. I rejoined the party as Hudson was holding court with the Blackwells, regaling them with a story about a particularly challenging case. And that's when I realized the precedent from the 1998 Harmon decision could be applied. It completely transformed our approach. What Hudson failed to mention was that I had discovered that precedent during one of my all-night research sessions early in our marriage. I'd woken him at 3 a.m. excited by the finding, only to have him present it as his own breakthrough in court the next day. "Fascinating approach," Gregory commented. "Your analytical skills are impressive." "Hudson has always had an eye for overlooked details," I added pleasantly, sipping my sparkling water. "It's one of his many talents." Hudson shot me a curious look, perhaps detecting something unusual in my tone. I raised my glass slightly before turning to answer a question from Rebecca about the wine selection. As we moved to the dining table, Hudson took his position at the head with Gregory Blackwell to his right. I sat at the opposite end, the perfect hostess overseeing the service. The first course arrived. A delicate seared scallop with citrus reduction that drew appreciative murmurs from around the table. Halfway through the main course of herb-crusted lamb, I excused myself once more, ostensibly to ensure the dessert preparation was on schedule. In reality, I was confirming that my digital tripwires remained undetected. Hudson had attempted to access the offshore accounts twice during dinner, his face betraying nothing as his phone discreetly informed him of access errors. I could almost see the rising panic behind his practiced smile. When I returned to the dining room, a commotion at the entrance caught everyone's attention. The maitre d' was attempting to block someone from entering our private space. A woman's voice, insistent, slightly slurred, carried over his polite objections. "I know he's in there. Hudson Mercer. I need to speak with him right now." My heart raced, but my expression remained placid as Sadie pushed past the flustered staff member and stumbled into our carefully orchestrated dinner. She wore the diamond pendant prominently displayed against a dress too revealing for the venue. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes wild with what appeared to be a cocktail of anger and fear. "Hudson," she cried, spotting him. "Why aren't you answering my calls? Something's wrong with the accounts." The room fell silent. Hudson froze, fork suspended midway to his mouth as every head turned from Sadie to him. I could practically hear the professional relationships cracking in the silence. "I'm sorry," Hudson finally managed, standing slowly. "This is a misunderstanding. This woman is. She's a client who's clearly distressed. If you'll excuse me for just a moment." "A client?" Sadie's laugh was harsh. "Is that what we're calling it? Tell them, Hudson. Tell them about Costa Rica and how you promised we'd leave after this dinner." Gregory Blackwell's expression hardened as he carefully placed his napkin beside his plate. "Hudson, what exactly is happening here?" "It's nothing, Greg. A misunderstanding. If you'll excuse me for just a moment to handle this." Hudson grabbed Sadie's arm, pulling her toward the hallway, his face a mask of controlled fury. I timed my next move perfectly, waiting until dessert, Margaret Winter's famous chocolate soufflé, was being served. As the waitstaff presented the delicate creations, phones began buzzing around the table. Every partner was simultaneously receiving the evidence of Hudson's systematic theft. Joseph Winters looked at his phone, then at me, his expression grim with confirmation of his suspicions. Hudson returned alone, his complexion ashen, just as Gregory Blackwell was scanning through the documents on his phone. The timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd choreographed it. "Hudson," Gregory said coldly, "I think this dinner is concluded. Greg, whatever you've received I can explain." "I sincerely doubt that," Gregory interrupted, standing. "Rebecca, we're leaving. Alice, thank you for a lovely meal under the circumstances." As the Blackwells departed, Hudson frantically pulled out his credit card to settle the exorbitant bill, desperate to maintain some semblance of control. The waiter returned moments later, leaning to whisper in Hudson's ear, but loud enough for those remaining to hear. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card has been declined." Hudson fumbled for another card, then another. Each was declined with the same apologetic murmur from the staff. His face flushed deep red, then drained to a sickly white as he realized what was happening. "Alice," he managed through clenched teeth. "A word." But it was too late. Joseph Winters stepped forward, phone in hand. "Hudson, the partners have convened an emergency call. Your access to all firm accounts has been suspended pending investigation." Hudson's scream of rage as the full impact of his situation dawned on him was indeed the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The sound of justice served on a silver platter at the dinner he'd planned as his grand finale. Hudson's rage-filled scream echoed through the now silent private dining room as the remaining partners exchanged uncomfortable glances. He lunged toward me, his composed lawyer facade completely shattered. "What have you done?" he hissed, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "You think you're clever? You have no idea what you've just started." "Actually, Hudson," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I've just ended what you started." I turned to face the stunned faces around the table. "Gentlemen, I believe you've received some troubling information about the firm's finances." I can answer any questions you might have. Joseph Winters stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Hudson and me in a protective gesture that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Alice, he said gravely, these documents suggest a systematic theft of client funds over the past 6 months. You compiled this evidence? Yes. I opened my clutch and withdrew a small USB drive. This contains the complete documentation, including recorded transfers, falsified expense reports, and correspondence regarding offshore accounts. I've been managing the firm's financial systems since its founding. When I noticed irregularities, I investigated. The 3 remaining partners huddled together, speaking in hushed tones while Hudson watched with growing panic. I could see the moment when realization dawned on him, how completely his world was collapsing, how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered him. You can't prove anything, Hudson snarled, regaining some of his legal composure. Any decent lawyer will tear your amateur investigation apart. Thomas Green, the youngest partner and Hudson's former protégé, looked up from his phone. The State Bar Association has already been notified, Hudson. And your girlfriend just caused quite a scene in the restaurant lobby before security escorted her out. She was rather explicit about your relationship and plans. Hudson's face contorted with fury. This is ridiculous. Alice is my wife. She has no authority to access firm accounts or client information. Everything she's done is illegal. I smiled for the first time that evening, no longer needing to maintain my perfect wife facade. Actually, I've been an authorized administrator on all firm accounts since inception. Check the paperwork, Hudson. You signed it yourself during our first year. You were too busy to bother with administrative details then. The look of dawning horror on his face was almost comical. You never removed my access, I continued. And as for authority, I haven't done anything but observe and document. You're the one who stole client funds. The restaurant manager appeared, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to settle the bill for tonight's event. Joseph Winters wordlessly handed over his credit card, his eyes never leaving Hudson. I believe we should continue this discussion at the office. Immediately. As the remaining partners escorted Hudson out, his protests growing increasingly desperate, I remained seated, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through weeks of planning and this dramatic evening began to ebb, leaving me hollow. Are you coming, Alice? Joseph asked gently. In a moment, I replied. I need to thank the staff. After the room emptied, I sat alone at the table that had cost more than my first car to reserve, surveying the half-eaten desserts and abandoned wine glasses. The wreckage of dinner mirrored the wreckage of my marriage, beautiful on the surface, destroyed underneath. I followed the partners to the firm 30 minutes later, having composed myself for the final act. The conference room atmosphere was frigid when I arrived. Hudson sat isolated at one end of the table, while the partners and their hastily summoned attorney occupied the other end. Mrs. Mercer, the firm's attorney, began, this is highly irregular, but given the circumstances. It's Miss Callahan, I interrupted, reclaiming my maiden name for the first time in 15 years. And there's nothing irregular about protecting client assets from theft. For the next 2 hours, I methodically walked them through Hudson's elaborate scheme, highlighting how he had planned to disappear with millions in client funds after the Blackwell dinner. With each revelation, Hudson seemed to physically shrink, his bravado replaced by grim resignation. What surprised me most was Margaret Winters arriving halfway through my presentation, followed by Diane Green and Patricia Foster, the wives of the other partners. They slipped into seats along the wall, watching with expressions ranging from shock to something that looked remarkably like admiration. When the initial crisis meeting concluded at nearly 2 a.m., Hudson was escorted from the building by security, his key cards and access revoked. The partners immediately initiated emergency protocols to protect remaining client funds and prepare for the inevitable legal and public relations nightmare. Margaret approached me in the hallway as I gathered my things. We're having breakfast tomorrow at my house. 9 a.m. You should join us. I'm not sure that would be appropriate given everything. I gestured vaguely at the chaos around us. Alice, she said firmly, for 15 years I've watched you build this firm alongside Joseph. The same goes for Diane and Patricia with their husbands. We know exactly what it means to be the invisible foundation. It's time we talked about it. 9 o'clock. The breakfast meeting proved to be a turning point I never anticipated. Over coffee and scones in Margaret's sunlit kitchen, I found myself surrounded by women who understood exactly what I'd experienced. They shared their own stories of unacknowledged contributions, of expertise dismissed as helping out, of careers sacrificed for their husbands' ambitions. The difference, Diane pointed out, is that you kept records and maintained your access. That was brilliant. Survival instinct, I admitted. I never truly trusted that Hudson saw me as an equal partner. None of them do, Patricia said quietly. But that doesn't mean we can't use our skills elsewhere. The conversation that morning planted a seed that would take root over the difficult months that followed. While Hudson faced disbarment proceedings and criminal charges, I navigated my own legal challenges. Our divorce was expedited given the circumstances, and I declined alimony in exchange for keeping our home and my restored maiden name. The criminal investigation revealed that Hudson had been more desperate than calculated. He'd accumulated gambling debts alongside funding his affair with Sadie, who quickly disappeared from his life when the money dried up. The man I'd thought I knew had been unraveling for longer than I realized, his perfect facade hiding multiple destructive secrets. 6 months after the Blackwell dinner, I sat across from a commercial real estate agent, signing a lease for a modest office space downtown. Callahan Financial Forensics would specialize in detecting fraud and financial mismanagement for law firms and small businesses. My first 3 clients were already lined up, arranged through a discreet referral network that Margaret, Diane, and Patricia had helped establish among their considerable social connections. On opening day, a stunning flower arrangement arrived from Joseph Winters with a note that simply read, "Credit finally where credit is due." As I arranged my new business cards on my desk, Alice Callahan, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, invisibly managing Hudson's world while he planned my disposal. The journey from there to here had been painful, but as I looked around at the office that bore my name, I finally felt the sweet satisfaction of reclaiming my worth. No longer the silent partner, I had found my voice, and discovered it was worth listening to after all.